So, welcome. We have Paul Nugent from the Aetherius Society, who's got a new book called Maya out, and we're going to have a fascinating conversation that's going to be deeply philosophical and take us on a journey. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much, James. Delighted to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I want to go back to the very beginning, really, of where you started on this journey. So, although you're currently in the United States, you were born in the UK,
Correct. Cambridge,
Cambridge, and
1958.
1958. Oh, you don't look it. You're doing well.
Trust me, I can feel it at times.
So, Cambridge is a lovely part of the world. And you were a wine dealer, is that right? In the wine
I
industry.
wasn't. Well, I mean, that's correct. I mean, I don't know how far back you want to go, but basically, having sort of graduated from college, I never knew what I really wanted to do. Consequently, I failed my A levels, at least the first time for taking. I managed to get one E. I don't know if they still do A levels in England, but I managed to get one E, which was the lowest passing grade. There's not a lot you can do with one E. But anyway, I managed to cash it in, so to speak, at a place called the Dorset Institute of Higher Education, where a friend of mine from school had gone the previous year and to study hotel management. I have to say I'd got absolutely no interest in hotel management. All I can say is I had none when I went there, and I had even less interest in hotel management when I left 3 years later. But it introduced me to the subject of wine while I was there, and that did interest me enough. I mean, because I realized that I had to sort of, pull my socks up, so to speak, and get going with earning some money and getting on with my life. So I managed to secure a job, not directly in the wine trade initially, but working for a small independent chain of delicatessens and supermarkets in London. But I was told at the interview that one of their two directors was a master of wine, and that I would be put on a course to learn more about wine, as a member of their management team. So it was enough to get me going. And after about 2 years within the company, I approached the director of wine, who'd sort of branched off a little bit with his own company called Wine Cellars, and said, "Do you want an assistant?" And to my great relief, he said, "Yes, actually, I've been thinking about that." He was a master of wine, but more than that, he was a wonderful mentor. He himself was studying Eastern philosophy at a school in London at the
Wow.
time, and there I was. Okay, now I'm doing what I want to be doing, which is spending my whole working time working with wine in London. But sort of coming out of nowhere, it just I could just sense that, hang on, but there's got to be more to my life than just this career and trying
Mm.
to get on in the world, make more money, get a mortgage, all this kind of stuff, get married, having kids. Um, and the way I describe it in the book. The first part of the book is called "The Things I Knew Before I Was Born," and for me, it was just sort of my soul. It was past life experience that was kicking in,
Right.
and I really didn't know what to do. You could say it was a crisis in a way, but having been, raised in the Anglican Church, I had a copy of the Bible, and I turned to it and I read the four Gospels,
Right.
and it was very meaningful for me. I mean, it sort of answered those deeper questions about how life should really be lived, and as a consequence of that, I didn't know where else to go. I went to Westminster Abbey, which I liked, but it was a bit austere. And then one Sunday afternoon, I wandered down the Mall, I think it is, into Trafalgar Square, where there's another old classic church, I think a Christopher Wren church, St. Martin in the Fields. And it just had a greater sense of intimacy. And so I thought, I'm going to stay here. I used to go to the Evensong, and I did, and I gradually got quite involved there. The church was a refuge for homeless people.
Right.
And so on Saturday nights, I used to go there and help clean the church, which was quite an ordeal, actually. But I became quite involved. And then, meanwhile, I also began to study Eastern philosophy under the influence of my boss, a wonderful man called Nicholas Belfridge. So that was, we're talking about the early 80s, 93, 94, I would say.
Right. So you were being embedded in kind of the Christianity from your upbringing and finding community and purpose, I guess, away from just the work, but then also having this Eastern philosophy. So where did it kind of the two teachings meet, and where did they kind of clash, do you think?
Yeah, indeed. Well, by a sort of rather bizarre set of circumstances, at least on the face of it, Nick changed his secretary. I was rather disappointed because I rather liked his original secretary, but she was hopeless at typing, and that, that's basically what he needed her for. So he got this other woman called Patricia, and as I mentioned, Nick was the wine buyer for this company. I was his assistant, and we had a chain of supermarkets and delicatessens in London. So it's rather a good job because wine merchants will send you a lot of wine to be sampled, and the office was right above one of the delicatessens. So quite often I would go downstairs and get a load of, well, not a load, but enough items for lunch. And Nick would uncork a few bottles of wine that needed to be sampled. I use the word sampled, not swigged back. And the three of us would have these wonderful lunches. Me with my so-called newfound Christianity, Nick with his Eastern philosophy. He was a highly intelligent man. To give sort of perspective, when he died, unfortunately, a few years ago, but he did receive a full-page obituary in the Times. He was a well-regarded figure, and he was studying Sanskrit. So just being in his presence was a tremendous education, and he also had this very gentle soul. I was very fond of him. And then Patricia, this secretary who'd come along, she'd been to a place in Scotland called Findhorn, if you've heard of it, which was started in the 50s. By two psychic women who'd grown this phenomenal garden by communication with nature spirits.
Right.
And Findhorn had become, as I say, world famous. So she brought that influence, but she was also a member of a place called the Aetherius Society, which was very close, with its headquarters very close to where we were, which had been founded in 1955 by a man called Dr. George King, who the Aetherius Society had been established upon communication with beings, intelligences coming from higher dimensions of other planets within our solar system. And so Patricia introduced me to that, utterly new as a concept, and yet at the same time, I was curious. I was naturally quite interested in it all.
Did you feel, was it like a curiosity? Did you think that this is unbelievable, or did you actually feel almost a purpose, like you were meant to go and discover it at that time?
Very good question. I think that in the grand scheme of things, coming back to the things I knew before I was born, I think it was my, if you like, it was for me to certainly encounter the Aetherius Society, and it's gone on. I mean, now, because we're talking over, well, roughly 40 years ago, ever since that time, it's become the focal point and main purpose of my whole life. I'd never thought, I wasn't one of these young kids who'd always been fascinated by flying saucers. I don't think I'd ever really thought of flying saucers,
right,
or life on other realms. It's just that, number one, Patricia, much like Nick, was a wonderful mentor for me. I knew that they weren't idiots, they weren't crazy, they weren't stupid, they weren't superficial as people. They were deep, they were thoughtful, they were intelligent. And so, it wasn't anything that she was flippant about, and therefore I wasn't. I began to investigate it. I had my routine. I was going to, the main part of the working week was working with wine, which incidentally, the three of us, well, primarily Nick and myself, I suppose, this very small company in 1987 became the Wine Merchant of the Year, or Daily Telegraph Wine Merchant of the Year, in the first kind of comparison of Britain's wine merchants, and all really down to Nick, because he was, he was a master of wine, and he had excellent palate, and he was a good buyer, and I did my bit for the company in that regard. So coming back, I had working with wine during the week, studying Eastern philosophy. I'd gone to the school, was studying that a couple of evenings a week. Still very involved with my Christian charity work at St. Martin in the Fields, and going there every Sunday. But I sort of added to it the Aetherius Society. I also went to Findhorn in the summer of 1985, and I went again in 86, and enjoyed it, resonated with that very much. But the big thing, the elephant in the room, so to speak, was this Aetherius Society and this man, Dr. George King, who had brought through these intelligences from other worlds.
And what? So you kind of went to this place and you heard about this, and did they describe how they got these messages?
Indeed. Dr. George King, although he was English, born in England in 1919 in Shropshire, and had gone through the Second World War as a conscientious objector, because he knew he would have fought. He was 20 years of age. He was, he's a kind of was up for it. But at the same time, he knew, there's a greater law: thou shalt not kill. However much one is opposed to Hitler and Nazism. And so he joined the fire service, fire brigade in London, went through the Blitz, saw the madness of that, and which obviously had a very profound effect upon him. And so he was looking to sort of question, our whole purpose for being here on Earth as human beings. What is our purpose? Surely it's more than bombing each other. Later going on to develop atom bombs and explode atom bombs over each other. Where's this hatred coming from? Where's this, ignorance really coming from? It's not our purpose. This is not surely how we should be living as human beings. And so we're talking about the sort of 1940s, either during the Second World War or certainly coming out of it. He began to study and practice various forms of yoga, which was, unusual in England at that time. And I'm not just talking about the postures, hatha yoga. It was the deeper aspects of yoga, primarily what's called pranayama, or yoga breathing, and mantra yoga. And he wasn't dabbling with this, an hour a day or less or a bit more. He was extremely intense. He was doing it for up to 8 hours a day. Wow. Over a 10-year period, right? So incredibly focused, incredibly disciplined. And the consequence of that intensity was that it caused, which is the goal, which is the purpose of yoga actually, is to raise a force that we all have in the base of the spine called the Kundalini. Right. And we're here to raise the Kundalini through a channel in the spine called the Sushumna channel. Open the chakras, all of the psychic centers. This is how we become enlightened. This is how we become, fully realized, and to attain our true purpose for being in a physical body. And anyway, after such extreme, intense practice, he was able to fully raise this Kundalini up to the higher chakras, the Christ center, and ultimately the crown chakra, in which one experiences a state, the most mystic state we can attain, according to the yogis, and I'm sure they're right, called samadhi. In the West, we call it cosmic consciousness. And it's a state in which one becomes a knower, Knower, obviously,
Yeah.
not the guy with
Yeah.
the R. Although he might have had it too, who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah. And that he'd attained that state of realization, if you like. The world had moved into the Cold War, when we'd gone beyond testing atom bombs, which we're doing very frequently. I think in 1958 we tested 1,600 atom bombs, the size of those dropped on Hiroshima. And then even in 1962, we'd gone utterly crazy with hydrogen bombs, and we dropped the equivalent of 12,000 atom bombs, the size of those dropped, as I say, on Hiroshima. And this was the way the world was going. It was also a time when flying saucers were visiting this Earth, and really had been, well, even during the Second World War, they were seen by pilots on both sides of the war, referred to as Foo Fighters. And we would say in the Aetherius Society, the reason for this is because these more evolved intelligences on other dimensions of the other planets within our solar system, and goodness knows what's beyond well, we go into that a little bit, but they watched over humanity for millions of years. Our understanding in the Aetherius Society is that we've had previous civilizations on this Earth, most recent being Atlantis, and before that Lemuria, both of which were destroyed by atomic weapons.
Right.
And even going further back than that, our understanding of this whole story is that we previously inhabited another world, another planet called Maldek, that was between Mars and Jupiter. And all that remains of Maldek is the asteroid belt. And there's strong evidence as to that being the case. Astronomers are they're not quite sure. But without going into too much detail, but not so very long ago, a giant, I think the biggest asteroid of all is an iron core worth quadrillions of dollars if we ever go there to mine it, which I'm sure some people think, we've got to go and mine that thing. But it also falls into a location in our solar system that, going with Bode's law, there was another guy along with Bode back in, I think, the either late 1700s or 1800s, but they came up with this incredible mathematical formula that has enabled astronomers to more recently find other planets, because there's a sequence to it, or probably a gravitational sequence, and there should be one right where the asteroid belt is. Anyway, that's certainly our philosophical understanding in the Aetherius Society, is that was our previous home. We destroyed it. You can't just however, destroy life, because ultimately it's all part of that thing that came out of the Big Bang, even before the Big Bang.
Right.
It's one great singularity.
Okay.
We're a part of it. We're one just tiny aspect of it. Going through evolution, everything is going back to that same singularity, if you like. Obviously, the Christian Bible says, "In the beginning was the Word." The Eastern tradition refers to it as the most holy word, the AUM. Scientists call it the Big Bang, rather crudely, I suppose. But also these ancient mystics, yogis who had attained samadhi, this full realization, describe it as the outbreathing of God,
right,
the reciprocal inbreathing of God, which to my mind raises, the absolutely wonderful, fascinating question. Well, for how long has this God been breathing? We're all part of some unknowable whole that came out of nowhere and nothing, and yet here we are. And again, our understanding in the Aetherius Society is, for us, it just gets more. We're here to evolve and advance here on Earth to attain this state of cosmic consciousness. That really is just the beginning.
Right.
That really is just the beginning of our experience, and it only goes on, obviously beyond death in the reincarnation sense. Got to keep coming back to attain that state. But it goes on. The teachings that have come through Dr. George King, it goes on beyond this world. Nirvana is not the ultimate state, as if that's really the beginning. And anyway, so I'm giving you a terribly long-winded answer, I'm afraid, James. But Dr. George King practiced these forms of yoga, attained cosmic consciousness. As I say, this was the height of the Cold War with flying saucers, because they'd been watching us, as I just kind of sidetracked and detailed, because here we were once again, threatening to destroy our civilization, potentially threatening to destroy the world, although we were told we wouldn't be allowed karmically to do that. These communications began to come through him. He would go into this very elevated state. We call it a positive yogic samadhic trance. And the first contact he had was in 1954, May 1954, by an intelligence, we believe, from Venus, higher dimensions of Venus, going by the Aetherius. Hence, we are the Aetherius Society. And Dr. George King was given other yogic techniques, which he adopted to enable him to gain rapport with these intelligences from the higher dimensions. And as this is 1954, 1955, when the Aetherius Society began.
Okay, that's fascinating. So, just a couple of questions before we go on to like the next part of it. Just out of my own curiosity, can anyone become a knower, and how difficult or easy is it to become a knower, or is it a bit like singing where everyone can sing, but you wouldn't want to hear everyone sing, if you know what I mean? Some people have that ability, and
not only can everybody become a knower, become enlightened, as they say, it's our fundamental primary purpose for being here. Unfortunately, we get sidetracked. We live in this this very sort of materialistic world at this present time, that we all have physical needs, and to some large extent, we have emotional needs, and they tend to be fulfilled by having a partner. And traditionally, that's a husband or a wife, and then the natural thing is to have a family, and before you know it, your life's taken off. And yes, it brings happiness to a certain extent, but it doesn't necessarily fulfill our true higher soul purpose. Hence, this whole incredible thing called reincarnation. We get continuous chances, so to speak. So yes, not only can anybody do it, but it's the destiny. It's the ultimate destiny of every single one of us. And if, as I'm sure we all do, and at some point we all will, are to leave this world, we will. Well, actually, it's not quite true. There's two ways we'll leave it. One is by attaining that state, or at least attempting to attain that state. But to sort of really dig into this story, coming back to the singularity and coming back to evolution, there's nothing that is not living. There's nothing that is not part of this wholeness, this oneness, this beingness, if you like, of God. The whole of creation is in that inbreathing or going back to God through higher and higher states of consciousness. And that fundamentally includes this planet, the Mother Earth, who, going back to Maldek, going back to Lemuria, going back to Atlantis, over the last 18 million years, has withheld herself. Not only has withheld herself on that natural evolutionary journey, but has had to put up with us wanting to go through Lemuria and destroy it, reincarnating to Atlantis and destroy it, threatening to do it again, at least, coming out of the Second World War into the Cold War. And we still live on that brink. Hopefully it won't happen, but you never know. I mean, it's a very dangerous world. And the earth has put up with us, but she, I mean, this, as I say, is central to the story, as detailed in my book, Maya, is changing. Because there's only so long. I mean, it said that Jesus could suffer for so long on the cross. Karmically, he was undertaking, in inverted commas, definitely in inverted commas, the sins of the world. I mean, those sins will have to be repaid by the law of karma. And so it is with the Mother Earth, the Logos, the flame, if you like, the life force of this planet, the soul of this planet, and indeed the whole solar system, and indeed the whole galactic system. It's all living. It all has consciousness. And the Earth is quickening. And we're living in those times. And this goes into, so much about why these, what we call them cosmic masters, these intelligences from beyond our own world, but within our own solar system, not exclusively, but primarily from within our own solar system, are helping us to, not only with philosophical cosmic teaching, spiritual teaching for sure, but with giving us tools to help us raise the whole vibration of Earth. And they're extremely active in that, and have been really since at least 1955.
Okay, and if that's our purpose, and we've destroyed a planet and Atlantis, is there an opposing force? Because almost at the moment there's a current kind of political ideology, almost globally, of not caring for the earth and not reaching that, and more consumerism. Where does that kind of come from? Is there an opposing force, or is it something that is there for us to navigate and enlighten by overcoming that?
Yeah, there is, James. I mean, it's a very important element of it. There are, ultimately, it's all of God, but God is a paradox, and it is dual poled, and there is, so to speak, darkness. You've got the light, to put it in simple terms. You've got good, and you've got evil. You've got darkness. I mean, why has Gaza been bombed, to smithereens? And why is there that animosity? Why are Ukrainians fighting Russians? Why did we have the Second World War? Why have we got the world that we've got? As I say, we're here to attain enlightenment, but we don't have it. And you could say we've never had it, except for a handful of individuals who've attained to that state, or else have come to this world, such as Jesus and Buddha, to speak to us about that state. The kingdom of God is within you. And the point is, you see, going back to Maldek, but I guess essential and critical to this in a philosophical understanding, is this thing called free will. In the Garden of Eden, I imply in my book Maya that the Garden of Eden was Maldek. We chose free will, and in choosing free will, it's temptation. There's temptation to believe that I can be separate. I'm separate, or whatever it is, and that I can do whatever I want. To a certain extent, one can. There is this allowance for free will in creation. When one, and when one gets carried away with free will, as we've done as individuals and as we've done collectively, you wind up with the kind of world that we've got, and all of which is operating under another law of God, if you like, called karma. As you sow, so shall you reap. And collectively, over the millions of years, mankind has sown a tremendous amount of violence and ignorance, or if you like, an energy vibration. We've put out a very negative energy vibration. that we have to deal with, that accumulates. And that's why on this earth we have what are called lower astral realms. We have higher realms, but when we do die and go through this reincarnatory process, we go to the level that we ourselves are vibrating on, or to reflect the karma that we have sown. This is basic and yet complicated, I suppose, at the same time. I mean, and where you get your sort of so-called heavens in higher dimensions, higher realms. There are 6 higher realms around this earth, but there are 4 lower astral realms that give rise to your Hitlers and your Napoleons, etc. And without getting too caught up in contemporary politics or so-called conspiracy theories or whatever, but it's far from being a happy world. And there's still a tremendous amount of sort of ignorance on the one hand, or dispute, but how much of this is being spawned by the lower astral realms, who are influencing and always have humanity, because we're sort of pretty mindless. Oh yeah, cool, man, cool, that's pretty good, yeah, I like that, but still very self-indulgent to a large extent. And we allow ourselves, perhaps unknowingly, to a certain extent anyway, if not a large extent, to become pawns of these what are ultimately referred to as, dare I say, black magicians, certainly dark magicians, on lower astral realms, who've had a tremendous hold and sway over this physical realm. I mean, you could say, and I would say, that it's Lord of the Rings, except for the fact that, no, this is the real Lord of the Rings. This is the real Middle Earth. And yes, it is fascinating and fantastic and for real. And we are here to break free of those shackles and bondage that we ourselves have sown. We've had Gandalfs, we've had the Jesuses, the Buddhas, and others more recently come to help us and show us the way. But that free will is still within us. And it's for us as individuals, as I say, to find the strength, and we can only do it individually, the moral strength, whatever it takes, the conscience, the voice of conscience. We all have that voice of conscience. It's terribly important to hear it. It's the most important thing, to hear it. I mean, in my own life, coming back to my own story and the things I knew before I was born, but I heard this voice in myself knocking on my soul or mind or heart or whatever, saying, Paul, wake up, man! You got it. There's more to it. There's more to it. And I took it, and it's brought me to where I am today, and I've got no regrets about that journey. So yes, there are lower astral realms. It does tie very much into the whole story of the Aetherius Society, because tying in with the quickening of the vibrations of Earth, those shackles in the lower astral realms need to be removed. We can't have a so-called new world, a new age on this Earth while that is still allowed to be there. And as I say, it does very much tie into this whole bigger story.
So what was it like when you first heard or felt those kind of messages when you started going to the society?
It was well, number one, it inherently felt right, and it felt true, and it felt honest. It felt honest, and fortunately, I had, if you like, dare I say, but the kind of the courage, to go with it, because it wasn't. It wasn't. My friends were sort of beginning to look at me like, "What's happening with Paul?" And certainly when I sort of was becoming involved with an organization which claimed that the founder had contact with beings on other from other worlds. This is not just wacky. This is like, pretty serious wacky. And I would say that, my friends and my family were consequently concerned,
Right.
as I would have been had I not been going in that direction, and
Mm.
one of my friends had. But in the same time, you see, as I say, there was a truthfulness and there was an honesty about it. And uh, I mean, I remember because I did move to the United States. I did, become a personal assistant to Dr. George King for the latter years of his life. I left my country. Coming back to my profession, wine traders. I mean, I was offered to become a director of of this wine company at the age of 30 and being given 10% of its worth. Ordinarily any young guy would leap at that.
Mm.
My parents would have been thrilled. I chose instead to reject that and go to the heart of the matter at the American headquarters in Hollywood, California, to be at the side of this so-called master of yoga, Dr. George King. And but nobody, not even my parents, God bless them, tried to stop me, because I think that they could see that, no, this is Paul's journey.
Mm.
And there was nothing inherently sinister about it. There was concern for obvious reasons. There was a certain amount of doubt, but they could see that I hadn't changed. I still supported Newcastle United, who've just made it to the final of the whatever cup it is. I still love football. I still drink beer. I'm fundamentally exactly the same guy, but I was I was compelled, and it was my soul. The things I knew before I was born. I was, so if you like, dare I say again, but strong enough and certainly willing enough to go with it, to take the risk. I'll take this risk. I'll take this gamble. I won't say I don't care, because I care tremendously. I care tremendously. It's all about care. That's what it's all about, which is a manifestation of love. It's all about care. I cared. I cared for the world. That's what drove me. I cared for the world more than I cared about my career in the wine trade and all that stuff and a mortgage. Yes, they were important. Yes, they had their place, but they weren't fundamentally important. And it's what's fundamentally important. And I went with it, and it took me literally to the side of a master of yoga.
And what was Dr. King like?
Well, he was a Yorkshireman. He grew up not so far actually from Scarborough, where you
Right.
are, Redcar.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
At least for part of his childhood. Gisborough, actually, a place called
Yeah.
Gisborough.
Yeah, that's only about 45 minutes.
Is it? Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And although he was, as I say, born in Shropshire, but I mean, you could call him a Yorkshireman, and Yorkshiremen are pretty down to earth people. And George King was a very down to earth person, very down to earth, and yet at the same time, in his late 20s, early 30s, had dedicated himself to these various forms of yoga, had attained samadhi, and had attained enlightenment, had experienced cosmic consciousness, could bring on the state of cosmic consciousness. So he was, if you like, dare I say, a Gandalf. And you knew you were in the presence of an enlightened master. It was in every pore of his body. And yet at the same, and he demonstrated it. And yet at the same time, because one isn't in that state all of the time, you go to bed, you wake up, you go about your daily life, there's things to be done. And in that sense, he was very normal, very down to earth. But a wonderful companion, because again, he was wise, goes without saying, and he was good, and it goes without saying. And those are wonderful qualities and people to be around.
No, definitely. So you said that I don't want to use the words aliens, but these higher beings, and so that are they physical or non-physical? You said they're on like a separate
Well,
separate level.
on their physical,
The physical, okay.
they're physical. I mean, there are astral realms. When one goes to an astral realm, one can project. You know, I could project from, or anyone can, from one's physical body onto onto another realm, and on that realm, everything is physical in that frequency.
Right.
And so it's physical on that frequency.
Right.
And yes, they inhabit physical bodies. They're able to dematerialize those bodies and reform a body. In other words, I mean, coming back to when Dr. George King was first contacted, as I say, in May of 1954, he didn't understand it. He heard a voice. He was in his small little flat in London. And he heard a voice that said, "Prepare yourself. You are to become the voice of interplanetary parliament."
Right.
He apparently was washing dishes at the time. He dropped the dishes. All he knew with his yogic experience from the previous 10 years and his capability was that that was no apparition. That was my signal. That was my tap on the shoulder. All right, boy, you're ready now for your role. And but he didn't understand it. He'd never heard of so-called interplanetary parliament, which is, I suppose, is a term that we can kind of relate to. No one who he knew could explain it to him. And so he said, right, a week later, because it was driving him nuts. What did that mean? I need to understand that, because that was my cue. And so he said, I'm going to lock myself inside my flat. I say flat because in America they say apartment, but of course,
yes,
flat. And go into samadhic meditation, so that and I'm going to remain in that state until I understand it. And while he was in that state, a yogi master who he recognized living on earth at the time literally came through his locked door. And as he walked across the floorboards, you know, the floorboards creaked, and sat down. And when he left, he dematerialized. So, I mean, you know, the things like Jesus walking on the water, Jesus had attained cosmic consciousness, and could do it's levitation, you know, again, there are various stories about George King going invisible. You know, we were talking about the 40s and 50s in England, when young men put macassar oil on their hair. He in these states of deep meditation, he would levitate, and people can still do this, but it would leave grease stains on the ceiling, and his landlady was concerned about them. So these beings on these other worlds, yes, it's physical. If you go there, it's entirely physical. They can dematerialize themselves and reappear. You know, and they would probably say that's basic.
Right.
In the grand scheme of things, that's basic. We, unfortunately, on Earth, with Maldek, Lemuria, Atlantis, and where we are today, we've been down a cul-de-sac. And that time is changing because the vibrations of the Mother Earth are being quickened, because she's making her own journey. The whole solar system. What's really going on, James, in the grand scheme of things, is that we're all moving towards a supercluster of galaxies called Laniakea.
Right.
That's what's really going on in the grand scheme, in the going back to God, at accelerating speed. This whole solar system, part of this galaxy that is teeming with solar systems, probably billions of them, together with over 100,000 other galaxies in our sector of the universe, are moving at phenomenal speed back to this supercluster of galaxies called Laniakea, which is a wonderful Hawaiian word which means immense heaven. That's what's really we're asleep. We're asleep. We need to wake ourselves up to this far greater reality of life and living it. We need to enlighten ourselves, and if we at least work towards enlightening ourselves, and because there's a tremendous change coming back to how we leave this earth. Either we enlighten ourselves to the point where ultimately we'll attain not only cosmic consciousness, but ascension, which Christ obviously demonstrated, why we have ascended masters, beings from our past who've attained that state, yogis primarily, but not exclusively, and who've remained on this earth. But another way, and this is the way that we're trying to avoid insofar as possible, is because of the change that is happening on this earth, because the vibrations are being heightened, because the lower astral realms to a certain extent, if not or the great extent, have been cleaned out. It's all written in the book Maya Maya. I mean, this is the story of George King and the Aetherius Society. But those who still cling to the old ways, who resist it, refuse it, who still want to, spend their whole life in drugs or crime or, going in the wrong direction. Yes, they'll leave this earth and they'll go to another through the process, but when they die and pass on, because the vibrations of this earth will be too high for them at that point, and they will go to another world that is a world that is still developing, but not on this same level of frequency. That is our metaphysical, spiritual, philosophical understanding.
So in a crude sense, this is school. A life is school.
Totally school. We're in school. Yeah, and it's all about graduation. I mean, it's a sort of, I didn't do very well at school, but you're right. And this is almost, it's kindergarten at best. And the other planets to which we go on are gradations of that same evolutionary scale. The most evolved planetary system in the solar system is Saturn.
Right.
It's all actually very well described in a series of transmissions given by a master from Mars in 1961 called Mars Sector 6, in a book called The Nine Freedoms. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy to hand, but you can find it from the Aetherius Society's website. It describes this evolutionary journey that begins with that courage, if you like, that bravery. That's the first elementary step. And behind it is love. And behind that service, and that leads to enlightenment. It's all, wonderfully outlined. That's the journey we're all on. In our understanding. I mean, we've all got this free will. There's no forcing anybody to accept this. But for people who are curious, I would say definitely investigate it.
What advice would you give to someone who, I spend a lot of time investigating and being part of things that defy our physical understanding of reality. And then for some people, they can't cope with that, because then we almost need a kind of linear physical sense of the world to navigate it. And then that crossover can feel like a bit like they're losing control of their mental state, I suppose. How can people explore spiritually without
very, very
losing
good
that?
question, James. Again, it has to come back to this sort of sense, if you like, of honesty. But it's also very important to remain balanced. It's very important to remain balanced. Don't get take it pace oneself. Pace oneself. Realize this is interesting. This is different. This is taking me out of that sort of linear world of seeming safety. It's not ultimately safe, but it seems safe. I've got enough money this week or this month or whatever it is. That seeming safety. And friends have got, family. I was gifted, I'd say, with the greatest gift that I could have been given, which is a loving family. It's a tremendous advantage. But it is no such thing as advantage, because it's all karmic. You know, we're given the circumstances we karmically demand, but we all at the same time do have a conscience. We all have a conscience. We all have a soul. So it is necessary to you know what? I'm gonna listen to that. I'm gonna heed that. I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna test that conscience, see if it's right. I think it, well, not even, it will instinctively be right. But all right, that's good. And it may be just telling me, you know, I need to give up drinking or do less drinking, or I need to do less drugs, or I need to do more exercise, or I need to assert myself a bit more. It may, I would say that it probably will. It'll begin at the level at where one is at. The things, the step one needs to do, like right now. My soul is calling me to do that. You know, not enlightenment in one fell swoop. It doesn't happen in one fell swoop, unless it's exceptional. So bit by bit, but stay balanced. I would say unquestionably. You know, I'm sure you've come across a book called the I Ching.
I haven't, no.
The I Ching. Well, the I Ching is a wonderful teaching, presumably given by Confucius. It's a book of divination. And I thoroughly recommend, you know, you investigate the I Ching. But in the I Ching, it often says, make progress in the good. Make progress in the good. Wash up the dishes. You know, make the bed. Help grandma, or do these things, you know, that aren't entirely purely selfish and especially lazy. You know, laziness it's almost the first rung. That's got to be broken. Laziness has got to be broken. You will not find it enlightened to be lazy at the same time. You've got to break that laziness. And start doing things. Maybe start reading a spiritual book. You know, start doing things that that inherently feel that one knows to be right and good and wholesome, and just, you know, keep taking those steps and see where those steps will lead. You know, I mean, if anybody's interested to take a closer look at the Aetherius Society, I mean, Dr. George King became a master of yoga by practicing various, you know, techniques of yoga. As I mentioned, yoga breathing, mantra yoga, prayer. Prayer is incredibly powerful. It was prayer that, you know, brought me on. And you'll find these things. I mean, there's one of the books is called Realize Your Inner Potential, you know, that we have in the Aetherius Society. So yeah, it begins within, and just take those gentle steps.
Brilliant. UFOs.
Yeah,
what are they, and what are they doing?
What are they?
Yeah, and what are they doing?
Is again, great question, James. I would say UFOs are, or UAPs as they're now called, unexplained. It's not just aerial phenomena, but unexplained phenomena. Are similar in a way to crop circles. Crop circles, okay, some were man-made for sure. Some of them certainly weren't. And you know, they were there to prompt us. They're there. The crop circles should not have been dismissed by the media and laughed at and ridiculed as two men coming out of the pub with a plank of wood. They're far more. You can't do that, you know, in the middle of the night without any errors, with a plank of wood, without breaking the stalks and everything else. And I think UAPs, because it is coming much more into the mainstream. I mean, the US Congress is having hearings, and you know, people are being sort of, you know, encouraged, if not prompted, to take this, you know, thing. They can't just dismiss it out of hand as nonsense. And it's the nonsense is thinking that there aren't UFOs. That we're still, it's all about us. It's all about us, you know, here on Earth. We're most important. We're it, you know, nothing else. If it is, it's microbial. I mean, that's the ridiculous thought, utterly ridiculous, fantastical thought. So I think we're being given glimpses to prompt us, to provoke us, And it's clear and obvious that if they were a threat, they'd have taken over this world, millions of years ago. I mean, they're not. They're there to help in this whole awakening progress. The way I describe it, actually, one way I describe it, is when we got a second cat. We had one cat. The cat we had didn't know we were going to get a second cat. And it had to be a very careful process of introducing the two to one another, because is this going to shock and terrify the existing cat? Is she going to freak out, and is it going to work? Because we wanted it to work. So we had to hide the new kitten in the bathroom for 3 days, while the existing cat, there's something a bit fishy going on here, and gradually acclimatize and become accustomed to the fact that, oh, okay, there is another animal in here, but it's not a threat. And unfortunately, humanity at this time, whether it's being spun that way or it's just instinctive for us to think, oh my God, ETs, UFOs, it's a threat. Shows, the weakness and silliness of our own thinking. But we need to feel that it's not a threat. And if they were to sort of openly appear, we would probably not only feel threatened, but we would probably go either ballistic, in a nationalistic point of view, or as an individual point way, and have a breakdown of law, anarchy and lawlessness and chaos, which is, they don't want that. They want us to, I guess, a bit like boiling the frog in the pan. They want us to slowly, or not even slowly, but hurry up, guys. Because the clock's ticking, but you're part of something greater. And in the realization that we're part of something greater, then everything else, all these so-called challenges and problems that we've got on Earth will, I think, quite quickly be taken care of, and we'll start to live as we rightfully should be living. Because it's the biggest game changer of them all. And so it's, intelligence is coming from within our own solar system, I think, obviously, well, to some extent from beyond our solar system. But I think that, again, there would be a karmic law in that regard. You see, the human race is fascinating to other races. We're fascinating. We destroyed a world. We destroyed 2 previous civilizations. We're still at each other's throats and necks again. Threatening to, and in the process, oh, by the way, we're also polluting and destroying our environment. And we got more and more people living extremely unhappy and dysfunctional lives, and it's kind of falling apart. Why? And so from that point of view, we're a curio, and it all goes back in the relatively short period of time. 18 million years is nothing in cosmic time to whatever happened pre the destruction of Maldek, when this seed of free will got swallowed and started and influenced, our journey from that time. And we need to heed that higher voice, that higher conscience, divine will, if you like, if we're going to save ourselves, as individuals, but as importantly, if not even more importantly, save humanity, because it's all oneness. It's all oneness. We are literally, at the end of the day, even the beginning of the day, our brother's keeper, and because it's all love behind everything. It's love, and that, at the end of the day, James, we've been an hour.
I was shocked when I saw my watch. I was like, well, we're halfway through, but it's been an hour. It's been fascinating. So thank you so much. My last question is, why did you write the book, and why should people read it?
I wrote the book because, James, I went on a journey. I went from Middle Earth into other places, and at the side of this a cosmic adept called Dr. George King, if you like, a Gandalf type character, but for real. I went on a journey, and I felt the need to come back to my own village and tell this journey, to tell this story, because it's profoundly important. It's profoundly real. It's amazing. It's fascinating. It's fantastic. I have to say that it's all utterly true. But it's certainly utterly true for myself, but I'd say it's true for the human race. It needs to be investigated. We're part of something vast. We're part of something cosmic. And we're all part of something called God, whatever that may be. And it's, ultimately it's undescribable, but we can all relate to it. So that's why I wrote it. And at the same time, that's why people should read it.
That's wonderful. And where can
it's a short book, by the way. It's not a long book. I'm not good at reading long books myself. You can read the whole thing in 2 hours.
And it's beautifully written as well. Where can people get hold of it?
Amazon and the Aetherius Society. The website is aetherius.org, AETHERIUS.org. I don't know if you're able to put those links in
I'll put those in the show notes, yeah.
Please.
Thank you so much for coming on.
James, it's been a pleasure. We struggled to get here. We had, different trying to reach out to each other, but we made it in the end, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
It's been fascinating. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.